Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. So this is the Diabeloop live exclusive event. This event is exclusive for the DDoc Voices and the DDoc Voices alumni. So we are so happy and honored to host you today. I'm going to quickly introduce the team that are here today in the office on a Saturday for this super exclusive event for you. So we have on the left Sylvie. Sylvie is working as a data scientist at Diabeloop, and she's going to answer your questions later on. Marie is here also today. Hello, Marie. She's working in the communication team with me. I'm Stephanie, and Marjolaine is also working in the communication team at Diabeloop. We are very happy again to have you today. For those of you who were at the networking event of DDoc Voices a few days ago, we gave you a quick teasing of what the event was going to be. But before we start, Eric Hoenecker, our CEO, has a word for you. It's coming. Eric?
It's been 8 years now. 8 years that I've been working on Diabeloop. And since the beginning, when I met the diabetologist that I started working with 8 years ago, one of the first things that I did was spend a lot of time listening and trying to understand, listening to patients and trying to understand what it's all about. And I realized that the science of diabetes, of data science, algorithms is one thing. The medicine of diabetology and diabetologists is another. But how all the varied people live with diabetes and how they approach their pathology and how you need to design the devices to have that, all three are important. And I've spent a lot of time again listening. And when Stephanie and then Bastian talked to me about DDoc Voices, to me it seemed a very natural fit because it doesn't make sense that at conferences you've got industry doctors and not a lot of patients because it's a different approach that is just as critical as the medicine, the science, and the industry when you try to develop devices that will lead you to improve life with diabetes. So thank you all for being there, and hopefully I'll catch quite a few of you live at ESD. Cheers.
Well, thank you, Eric. Again, I will thank you later for having been able to record this message for you. He couldn't be here today, but it was important for him to tell you again his attachment to the DDoc Voices. And now we're going to dig in. The purpose of the event, and that is passion rules my life, not diabetes. But maybe Marie, you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Since the very beginning, Diabeloop is convinced that every person living with diabetes should spend less time worrying and managing their diabetes to be able to dance and feel the rhythm, surpass themselves and go further, meet their challenges, be independent, and much more. Overall, we defend a life to the fullest, a life without interruption coming from diabetes. And this strong mindset and state of mind is at the core of all our communication, and that's the case of our latest brand statement about my patient rules my life and not diabetes. Why? Because before being a patient or a person with diabetes, you are an individual with your own personalities, needs, and desires and passions. and it's what make you unique. And we decided to represent some passion like gardening, yoga, cooking, and much more in key visuals. And of course, those patients are not exhaustive because every single patient counts and plays a role. And I will hand over again to Stephanie. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. So to illustrate what Marie said, of course, it's just not a sentence. As she said, it's a strong belief, and it's something that really fuels us at Diabeloop at the moment. And we had the pleasure to record some testimonials of people who are truly living their passion. But also living with diabetes. And we are lucky enough to have some of those people with us today. And we're going to start with Mathilde. Mathilde, she's, well, I'll let you see what her passion is, and later we will meet with her, and she will tell us more. Something that I have to tell you before we watch the testimonial of Mathilde is that you can ask questions to Mathilde after the video. She's with us today, and please use the chat of Facebook to ask her, the questions. And as you see, it will show on the screen. I will tell her, and she will answer. You will see, it will be great. But let's start.
Hi world, how are you? I'm Mathilde from Les Aventures de Mathilde, Adventure of Mathilda. I know, it sounds a bit French, because I am. Today, I'm here to talk about my little life around the world. Since nearly 10 years, I have traveled the world by myself with my backpack, my good moon, and my type 1 diabetes too. We can't really forget that, right? So yeah, I was 12 when I was diagnosed type 1 diabetes, and now I'm 28, and I'm actually living my best life. Let me tell you about my first trip. I was 19, just graduated from school, but didn't know what to do. Classic. And I decided to take a one-way trip to Australia. Why not? This huge country was so far away from home, pretty amazing, with a beautiful coast, kangaroos, koalas, spiders. Well, a nice destination, isn't it? I had less than 2 months to get organized on what to put in my backpack, what to wear, what to take, and about my diabetes too. I take 6 months of my treatment. That's the maximum you can have in one time in France. I talk about my insulin pens, blood glucose, needles, all the stuff. After that, when I had everything in my bag, about 15 kilos, plus my medical certificate with me, it's very important to have it at the airport in case someone asks you something, just to prove you're not a junkie. Then I was ready to fly for 28 hours. In Australia, I was an au pair, like a nanny. My first family was lost in a bush. I made a country life during 3 months in the middle of white kangaroos, porcupine, and 7 kids. Yes, I was in charge of look after 7 kids between 6 months and 11 years old. Well, yes. And when I arrived in Australia, I didn't speak any English at all. I guess I learned pretty fast with them. And I changed families 2 times. I discovered different spots in Australia, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Sydney. I was so proud of myself to go somewhere and make friends, create my own new life, to have no limit to enjoy my adventure.
Well, thank you, Mathilde, for this talk. It was really fun recording it with you, and it was fun watching it. Please, you can ask your questions to Mathilde in the chat. But I have a question for you, Mathilde. What I wanted to ask you is, what changed the most for you in your diabetes management in between the first time you traveled with diabetes and now that you travel with diabetes? What was the biggest change?
Hi everyone. I will say I have grown up. When I start, I was 19. Now I'm 28. So now I'm probably more organized. I learn with time how to. I learn like few tips to know not take all my packaging. Just take my insulin. With all boxes and stuff. Like if I go in cold country or warm country, like tips like put my insulin in towels to keep cooler or warmer. But probably the big thing it's I know me now more than when I was 19, and it's more easily to manage my diabetes than before.
Okay, and are there countries where it's easier to travel when we have diabetes, and countries where it's a real challenge, or maybe they know less about? Or
Yeah, definitely. It's depending where you go, but I would take the extreme. Like if you go to in UK or Canada, they are very good about awareness with diabetes. They talk about so much on TV, on social media. But if you go like in Asia, I've been to Malaysia, Indonesia, well, they don't talk about diabetes because it's completely different life over there. So it's depends where you go, and sometimes it's pretty hard to see they don't manage that we do in Europe, for example. And
oh, I think we have a question for you from Nat. She's asking, Mathilde, can you tell us what happened with your diabetes supplies after 6 months?
Hi Nat. So I do usually come back to France and take 6 months again of my stuff, or when I am lucky, sometimes my mom or my friends come to see me in the country where I am and give me 6 months more of treatment. That's it's depending as well, but I'm very lucky to have some parents to go. And when I was in Australia for 1 year and a half, they come to see me, they come to over me and give me more stuff. And and I travel like that. I'm very lucky about that.
Okay, thank you. Do we have another question for Mathilde? No, I think that's it. But your testimonial was so fun. And it was, once again, it was fun to do it, and it was so nice that you were with us today. I have to tell you guys that Mathilde, she made an exception for us and for you today, but she has to run now. Are you going to on another travel or?
Yes, actually, so let's see on my social media where I'm going tonight, because it's very particular, but
Okay, another surprise then. Let's follow Mathilde and her travels on her social media. And thank you again for having been with us today. And for sure, we see you soon. Bye, Mathilde.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's made me want to go on vacation, actually. But before we do that, we have another testimonial for you. Change of scene a little bit, even though, well, you will see where this person is going to take us. And we're going to embark with Jack now.
My name's Jack, and I'm going to start by painting a bit of a picture. So imagine you're in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean, and you've just sailed through 2 Category 2 depressions on a sailing boat that's best described as a carbon fiber missile. And the 3rd big depression is basically on you. That's 50-mile-an-hour winds, 8-meter waves, and you've hardly slept in 6 days. Eating is near impossible with the getting thrown around on the boat. and the wind chill's down at -10. It's a cold, dark November night. And you're reminded of that every time you get hit in the face by a high-speed spray, more like an icy pressure washer. If that sounds miserable, then it is. But it's also my dream job. And it's been my dream job since I started sailing when I was 6 years old. It's about competition, it's about adventure, and it's about sailing the coolest boats in the world. They're technological marvels. They do top speeds of 40 knots, nearly 50 miles an hour, and sometimes they fly above the water on hydrofoils. And these boats are what I've been dreaming of for that long. So what does it actually take to sail these boats? Well, my job is to race these boats for days, sometimes weeks at a time, across oceans. You can be hundreds of miles from land, hundreds of miles from the nearest support, and sometimes I'm even on my own. So there's 3 things that you have to do when sailing these boats. The first thing is to go as fast as possible in a straight line. Now, they're race boats, and so the performance window is very narrow. So as soon as something changes, the wind or the waves, and you end up outside of this performance window, then the boats either become highly unstable or very slow. So you're constantly adjusting things. You're changing sails, which weigh 50, 60, 70 kilos. You're changing the trim of the sails. You're changing the trim of the hydrofoils. You're adjusting the movable ballast inside the boat. You're always working. And the second thing is to pick the fastest route from A to B, which is very rarely a straight line. So that means downloading and analyzing weather forecasts, combining those with the performance model of the boat in order to predict the optimal route from A to B. So effectively sitting in front of a computer and analyzing data. And the third thing you have to do is look after yourself and look after the boat. So that means 20 to 30-minute bursts of sleep every few hours, and you might go as long as 36 hours with no sleep at all. It means freeze-dried space food when you're consuming nearly 5,000 calories when it's really cold. And then looking after the boat and fixing anything that happens to break as you go. Now, if that sounds like a lot to manage, that's because it is. But as if it wasn't, when I was 21 years old, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Probably the only condition in the world where the patient makes potentially life-critical dosing decisions for themselves every single day. They say that the average person living with type 1 diabetes makes more than 180 additional decisions compared to someone without the condition. It sounds like even more to worry about. But what I decided is, I'm not going to be someone living with type 1 diabetes who happens to go sailing. I was already a sailor. So I was going to be a sailor who happened to have type 1 diabetes. And if I had all this stuff to worry about already, what did it matter that I had a little bit more to worry about now? And then I discovered something really cool. So to be a good solo sailor, you have to understand yourself. You have to know your limits. You have to know how far you can push yourself, but what you need and how to recover. And having type 1 diabetes gave me this whole new level of introspection. It became the trick up my sleeve that none of my competitors have. So when I was 6 years old, I had a dream to race around the world. When I was 21, I was told I couldn't even race across an ocean. When I was 24, I became the first type 1 diabetic to race solo across the Atlantic, and I now have multiple world records to my name. And next, I hope to become the first type 1 diabetic to realize that dream and to sail non-stop, solo, and unassisted around the world.
Well, we're back. with Jack, who is with us. While you were speaking, Jack, there was a comment on the chat of Andrea, who was saying that, well, you as you see, that adjusting things on the boat seems to be a bit similar to managing your blood glucose. What do you think about that, Jack?
Yeah, well, exactly. I think that's what I find so interesting. That's exactly the analogy I would make. It's about managing tasks. You know, when you're sailing these boats, what I've learned is there's always too much stuff to do. There's always too many things that you can do, and so you have to focus on the really important ones, and then try and divide your time and your energy up. And it's easier to do on the boat because we're always thinking about performance. So we're trying to think about, you know, the things that are going to gain us the most. And then I realized that yeah, living with type 1 diabetes, there's always too much to do. You know, there's always things that you don't quite get around to, and there's always stuff that you have to do. And so it's about you know, deciding what's really important, understanding what's really important, and then also knowing when to let it go, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Another question for you from Laura. Jack, do you have another boat accompanying you when you're out and about? Also curious if you never had a bad law in a really unfortunate situation. So that's actually 2 questions, but please pick one or answer both. We're all curious.
No, that's great. Thanks, Laura, for the questions. No, we don't have any, you know, I guess we'd call them like a support boat. So generally when we're out racing, we're on our own. The nice thing is that you know, most of these events are races, and so you have your competitors. And there's you know, it's a really great community in the racing world of sailing where you know, everyone has this kind of acknowledged rule that we're out there together, and that if someone gets into trouble, then you help each other. And I think that's something I really like about the community around the racing sailing world, is that at the end of the day, you know, we're all there to look out for each other. But no, we don't have any support boats that follow us around, and at the end of the day, they probably couldn't keep up with us. So even the motorboats will struggle to go as fast as we can sail for long distances, you know, across oceans. And then your second question, have I ever had a really bad low in an unfortunate situation? I haven't, which is a good thing. And that's, you know, I like to think that's because we have a very methodical approach to going out and doing these races, doing these challenges. And the whole idea is to manage risk. And so to try our best to preemptively avoid those situations that could be dangerous. And so a lot of my strategy around managing diabetes offshore when I'm racing is, you know, it's obviously about performing, but first and foremost before that, it's about staying safe. And there's a number of things I do, strategies I do alongside the technology that I use that mean that hopefully I can always avoid the really, really bad situations.
Okay, well, great. I have actually a last question for you, guys. If there are some questions that we missed or something, don't worry, because after the event we're going to put all the unanswered questions together and get you an answer anyway. So apologies if we miss some. We try not to. But I have one for you. It's not really a question, but because I already know the answer. But you have like a challenge. A new challenge that you would like to be part of. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this big project that you have?
Yeah, no, thank you, Stephanie. And you know, just a moment to say what a privilege it is to have done this with you guys and to be here with the D-Doc Voices community. It's so fantastic to have, you know, the diabetes community all in one place, and you know, it's a privilege to be a part of that as well. So yeah, so my next big goal, as I kind of mentioned at the end of the video, is to race in this race called the Vendée Globe. It's a non-stop, unassisted and solo race around the world. So the record is 74 days. So it's a pretty big challenge. No one's ever done it with type 1 diabetes. And you know, it's been my dream for as long as I can remember, and I've been working towards this goal for I guess, the last 10 years. And a part of that progress was racing solo across the Atlantic. So now we're at a stage where I know that I can do it. And, I have the support of the sailing community and the race organizers to go and do it. And importantly for me as well, I know that I can race and be competitive whilst managing type 1. And so we're now trying to build that project, and that's, building a team with the right partners and the right people and finding the right boat, and then looking to go out and do that at the end of 2024.
Well, you do know that you have all our support for that. And some questions came. If you still have time, we have some questions for you again. Zuhad wants to ask about the method. My French accent does not allow that, sorry. Methodical approach. So is your endo on board with it? And what do you usually eat before embarking on the journey?
Yeah, interestingly, so I was diagnosed 7-8 years ago. And the nice thing for me is that I don't feel like I've ever had any pushback from, care professionals, from medical professionals. And they've always been, I think I'm lucky in this regard, but I've always found them very supportive. Now, what's slightly different is when I was first diagnosed, there were certain precedents and rules that meant that I couldn't compete in these races. But what we had to do is we had to put a case together, and a big part of that centered around the technology that is now available and has become available to people living with type 1 in the last 10 years. And the race organizers were very receptive to that. So yes, my endo is on board with it, and they're a critical part of me being able to go and do these challenges, because there are so many unknowns in going, out in the ocean and pushing yourself, physiological limits, psychological limits. So having the right expertise and professionals as part of the team to support me is really important. And the other question was, what do I eat? So what do I eat when racing? When racing, I mostly freeze-dried food. We need to find foods that are lightweight because we have to carry them all, but they're also nutritious and give us enough calories. And in a way, those are really nice because the freeze-dried packets come with exactly the nutritional breakdown on them. So I know exactly how many carbohydrates, how many grams of carbohydrate are in each meal, and I don't have to count. And then what I eat before a race is I just try to not change my routine. So what I would normally eat, work with a nutritionist to make sure I'm eating the right things. But then the key for me is just to not change anything. So I'm not throwing anything in my body that it's not ready for.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Thank you so much. And once again, thank you for recording your testimonial with us, and thank you for being here today, out from Italy, if I'm not mistaken. So enjoy your time there. And now we're going to not show you a video because we have a live testimonial as well. We have asked Alysse to be with us today, and we're so happy that she said yes to us to share her passions. So Alysse, I think you have many passions. I think you have passion about traveling as well. You have passion about modeling, fashion, and some more. But please just tell us about it.
Hi. Yes, I have lots of passions. My name is Alysse Alessandro. I'm a plus size model and lifestyle influencer who focuses on creating fashion, travel, LGBTQ plus content on my blog, readytostare.com, and across my social media platforms, which reach a combined 1 million impressions every month. Sometimes my life is super glamorous. I'm coming to you from a 5-star hotel. Sometimes I'm on the road and coming to you from the comforts of my car. Luckily, I've made authenticity a huge part of my platform, which is where my diabetes diagnosis comes in. 6.5 years ago, I sat in my doctor's office. I was getting ready to leave for my first cruise the next day. And I'd gone in a few days prior for a physical, because I wanted to get a prescription for motion sickness patches. I realized when I was writing about this that you all probably, if you're not in the US, don't have this problem because you have great healthcare. But here you kind of have to like sometimes trick the system. So if you go for a physical rather than I need motion sickness patches, they'll cover it. So I went for a whole physical instead of what I really wanted, which was these motion sickness patches. And thank God that I did decide to do the appointment that way, because my doctor, who insisted I came for a follow-up, told me that I had diabetes and that I had type 2 diabetes, and I was only 28 years old. And my first question was, can I still go on the cruise? Which I think is a testament to how much I genuinely love traveling. And I was also really in shock. Diabetes runs in my family. I knew that there was always a possibility. Both of my grandparents passed from complications of diabetes, but you know, they were older. I'm only 28. I didn't think that this would happen to me so soon. So I was really in shock. But I ended up going on the cruise the next day. Literally got my diagnosis on a Friday, and on Saturday I was on a plane to Miami to leave for the cruise because I really decided that I just wasn't going to let diabetes change my life too much. So while I was on that cruise, and I went on a deep sea submarine tour, I went zip lining, cave tubing, and I hung on the beach with my friends. The majority of people didn't even know that I went on this cruise just a day after finding out I had diabetes. Over my first year of being diagnosed, I made the choice not to discuss having diabetes publicly on my platform. Like I said, I already at that point had this public platform as a plus size model and someone who had spoken a lot about body positivity. And I decided to use that first year as a challenge to myself to conquer my own fears. I made a conscious decision that I was going to spend that first year living with diabetes and not living in fear of diabetes. My motto became, it's okay to be afraid, but do it anyways. This brought some of my biggest personal and professional accomplishments. In addition to ziplining, which by the way was very scary, I went horseback riding for the first time in years. I did a lot of business related traveling. I was on Good Morning America. I did a lot of speaking engagements, modeling jobs all over the world, pushed myself creatively. I did a lot of long editorial shoots. And I was also making jewelry at the time. So I turned out a lot of jewelry orders on tight deadlines. When I first found out I had diabetes, I remember calling and telling a friend at the time, that I had gotten this diagnosis. And I'll never forget what he said. And perhaps maybe somebody has said this to you before. I'm sure you feel like this is a death sentence. And the fact that that's how he decided to word it, it still honestly makes me mad 6 years later, because society trains us to believe that being in a larger body and having diabetes are some of the worst things that can happen to you. As someone living in a larger body and existing on the internet, I have been told you're going to die, you're going to get diabetes, you're going to have heart disease, all of these things. People look at me as a plus size model and assume the worst. And one of the worst things they assume that could happen to me is having diabetes. And I used to always say, you can't tell someone's health by looking at them. Like, just because I'm in a larger body, that doesn't mean I have diabetes. But now I did have diabetes, right? And that worst thing that someone could say about me, it was now true. But I realized that while it was true, it didn't necessarily mean what they felt that it meant, that my life was over, that this was a death sentence. The worst thing that someone could wish upon me to try to get me to hate myself, like I have it and I'm living it. I'm living this unafraid life. So I came to realize that the reactions that people have to having type 2 diabetes are often projections of their own fear. But that fear belongs to them, not to me. I know that this diagnosis is not a death sentence. People of all sizes live and thrive every day with diabetes. I think the 2 talks we've already heard today are such a proud testament to that. And my own diagnosis gave me a major key to understanding what was going on in my body. Either way, my body had diabetes, and now I could work to treat it. That knowledge was ultimately really powerful. So a year after my diagnosis, I decided to talk about living with type 2 diabetes on my platform, because I wanted other larger bodied people living with diabetes to know that they aren't alone. I didn't want anyone else to feel that guilt or shame that we're told to feel as people with larger bodies who have type 2 diabetes. Because when I was diagnosed, I really couldn't find anyone who looked like me, who was out there talking about it and challenging that stigma. So I'd made the decision to kind of live publicly. And another way that I was able to be visible and living with type 2 diabetes is when I started wearing my Freestyle Libre continuous glucose monitor. So I started wearing it during the pandemic when we were in lockdown. So I didn't really get any public feedback to it because I was at my home by myself. And the first time that I wore it out, literally a stranger like tapped me on the shoulder and was like, "Is that one of those things for diabetes?" And I was really taken aback that a stranger would ask me about it, because, I built so much of my platform on, you can't tell someone's health by looking at them, and not all people in larger bodies have diabetes. But now I realized that wearing a CGM outs me as a person living with diabetes. I realized that this was a way that someone could tell that I had diabetes just by looking at me. And I decided that this could be a way to educate folks about living with type 2 diabetes. So I made the choice to wear my CGM proudly in my modeling campaigns. I have had photographers ask me if I wanted them to Photoshop it out in photos, and I told them absolutely not. Like, if you can see my CGM, I want it there because that's part of who I am. Living with diabetes is part of who I am, just like being plus size or the fact that I'm queer. I can't take off this part of my identity. I can't take it off when it's convenient. No, I'm going to have diabetes every day. That's just not something I can change. And I realized that, I'm not the manifestation of someone's greatest fear. I'm a person worthy of being treated with respect and dignity. And I also have realized through doing some of these talks and meeting some amazing folks with type 1 diabetes that I can hopefully help to bridge the gap, right? Because we're in this together. The stigma that people have against type 2 diabetics, it affects you all as well. So I just want to kind of help recognize that we can do the work together. Our journeys aren't the same, but we can certainly learn from each other. Only a few weeks after my diagnosis, I met with a diabetes educator and I told her about the things I'd been researching, and I asked her some questions. Her approach was really kind and empathetic. And one thing she said to me that has really framed my diagnosis and my treatment moving forward is she said, "Don't let diabetes define you because it doesn't have to." Diabetes has changed my life, but not in the way that you may think. Diabetes made me less afraid to take risks, and it started me on a process of inquiry. I don't know that I would have been able to go on otherwise because passion has always ruled my life. I've always been a very passion-driven person, passionate about fashion, passionate about inclusivity, advocacy, and passionate about travel. And I think that diabetes has made me even less afraid to take chances. I've become an international ambassador now for Freestyle Libre. I've been on billboards, runways, I've traveled the world, all while living with diabetes. But don't worry, this isn't just about me, because diabetes made me mindful of the ways that we talk to and about people living with this disease. It made me want to fight the stigma, not just for myself, but for all of us.
Thank you so much, Alysse, for everything that you just said. And we have questions for you, but before the first question, I just want to make a comment. I thought that your testimonial was so inspiring, and also I have to say that you're positively glowing, and I do not know how you do that from a car, but you do.
So every model knows her angles, and the light is this side.
You're very, very, very talented. Let's have the question from Natalie, I think. Nat is asking you, did you start a treatment as soon as you were diagnosed? I mean, the day before you started traveling?
Yes, which is wild, right? So my doctor put me on medication, and because we didn't have that much time to do education on eating, I was just given like very strict instructions: no sugar, no carbs, definitely no alcohol. And then I was on the medication. So, and then obviously I was, checking my levels like 3 or 4 times a day. So I was given really strict instructions on what to eat, and then I was given the medication. So I started my treatment immediately, but I guess I wouldn't say I had a full understanding of what I was doing, but I was able to, I had like basically a crash course. And then when I got back, kind of, I started to learn more about, okay, here's what this means. And, but I tracked my numbers the whole time that I was on the cruise, and I just had really strict instructions about like what I could and couldn't eat. So.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for you because you mentioned that you have type 2 diabetes, and I also know that you were part of the D-Dog Voices. Steffi was here in the chat to salute you just a bit ago. And I know that the D-Dog Voices, as much as we and we are. It's very important for us now that the type 1 and type 2 diabetes advocacy can meet and also have a stronger voice together. Do you feel that this is happening? Have you felt problems when you were speaking as a type 2 diabetes with the type 1 community? Do you think it's evolving? Do you have a catch on that?
I'd like to say that me being in these spaces is the first step to it evolving, because I think oftentimes we are left out of the conversation because some people incorrectly still have this stigma that if you have type 2, you did it to yourself, as opposed to type 1, you're born with it. And either way, it's genetic. You know what I mean? So I think just being in this space and having the opportunity to challenge that stigma, and hopefully, I always say that when I'm sharing my personal experience, I have the opportunity to open hearts and minds. So I do feel that just being in the room and being able to share my story hopefully helps to kind of bridge that gap, because I do think that stigma ultimately affects all of us, and it's on us as people living with diabetes to correct people and say, no, this is a genetic disease. Not all larger body people have diabetes. Not all larger body people have type 2. Like, there's so much that we can all do. And even if you don't have diabetes, you should still do that, right? You should still correct people and let them know. So I think that it's really important that we come together and work together, because I think if we continue to look at diabetes as something that is someone's fault, we're less likely to get the empathy that perhaps is needed for kind of like change, right? You need to empathize with a person, and with the stigma, it makes it really hard to do that. So I think this is a good start. I'm happy to be in these spaces and be invited. So.
And we were really super happy to have you. If we have more questions for you. Oh, we have one, sorry. Laura has a question for you. She's asking, how can we as type 1s be an ally to people living with type 2 diabetes?
Yeah, so I think, just like I said, really just working to correct people and watch, how you talk about type 2 people living with type 2 diabetes, and not saying, oh, I'm not one of those. I'm not type 2, I'm type 1.
Mhm.
There can be sort of that want to separate, right? And I think about why you want to separate. Does that come from a place of, maybe not wanting to be like us, right? But we're all in this together. We all have the same thing. It just works differently in our bodies. So I think being an ally is just really not separating yourself and making sure you correct people, right? Like, there's a lot of people who will say things like, oh, I can't wait to eat this cupcake. It's going to silly things like that. And you all know as type 1s that that's not true, right? But that is a statement that impacts us as people living with type 2, that you can eat your way into type 2. But that's not true. That's not true. So when you hear people making those statements, correct them. When you hear people making jokes, correct them. I think that's a really great way to be an ally. You're probably used to people making misinterpretations about what it's like for you living with type 1. So being an ally, I think, is also helping us to challenge those misinterpretations or those jokes or things that further the stigma. To me, I think that's really helpful, just to say, you can't eat your way into diabetes. This is a genetic disease. Like, not all larger body people have it, and not all, thin people don't have it. People of all sizes have diabetes. Just keeping that message really front and center, I think, really helps us kind of have one unified message and work on challenging that stigma.
Yeah. As Natalie just said, we are all on the same boat.
Yes.
We have diabetes to live with. I don't know if it's Jack's boat, but we are all on the same boat. Thank you so much, Alysse. It was really a pleasure that you were able to join us today.
Thank you.
And what we wanted to do as well when we were thinking about the Diabeloop Talks is, of course, having people with diabetes share their passion and how they handle living their passion while living with diabetes. But also, we wanted to show how people who work on treatment for diabetes are actually inspired by our voice, your voice, and that they are not just people, doing their thing their way with science and whatever. And no, there are people who are sharing with the community who need your voice, to come to them, so they will be doing their job better. And so we asked Alexandre, who is a data scientist at Diabeloop, to explain how he came to work in diabetes and how it works for him. And because he couldn't be with us today, well, he has a wedding. I don't know why he chose to go there, but he did. And Sylvie is going to answer your questions after the testimonial of Alexandre. So please put them in the chat, and she will answer it right after the video of Alexandre.
Hello everyone, my name is Alexandre and I'm a data scientist at Diabeloop. My job today is to design new algorithms solving complex physiological problems using techniques like artificial intelligence or machine learning. I was still at school when I realized that artificial intelligence could be very useful in order to help physicists take better care of patients in lots of ways. By working with a psychiatrist, we designed a tool to help him better diagnose some high-risk patients that could harm them or others. And I was actually amazed with how mathematics and statistics were able to better treat or even maybe save some patients. Since then, I knew I wanted to work in the healthcare industry, trying to help and have an impact on patients' life. So you might wonder, what is an algorithm? And it could be resumed as just a list of instructions to do in a certain situation. This is actually what happens to patients when they decide to send a bolus in the case of hyperglycemia. The situation is hyper, the decision is bolus. You give more information like the blood glucose level, have you been eating before, and you will probably take a smarter and better decision. And all the decision process in your head is what is called an algorithm. And the only difference between that and what is machine learning is only whether you define the rules or you let the computer find them on its own. But either way, you can influence your algorithm based on the objectives you try to achieve. Listening to patients and understanding really the physiology behind diabetes, we focused a lot of our development on preventing hypoglycemia. Because we know that today it is the major concern of patients and the biggest interruption in their lives. The idea is to add lots of layers of checks and safety, always wondering if the insulin proposed could harm the person. Then we looked at what were the two biggest events in the daily life having impact on glycemia, which is meals and physical activity. And we tried to simplify those as much as possible. With meals, the idea would be to detect ingestions of carb and automatically adjust without any interaction with the person who can keep going with his or her life. And with physical activity, we know that the impact not only is right now, but it also have an impact until the day after. And this activity could be as simple as walking, cleaning, or gardening at your house. So adding activity information from a smartwatch, for example, in the algorithm is one way of suppressing the last interaction that is still needed to have a good control over glycemia. Finally, to build a good algorithm, you need to split the task into two. And first of all, understanding the situation and acting in consequences. So based on previous data we collected from patients in lots of clinical trials, we developed what is called machine learning to understand the situation and predict the evolution of the patient glycemia. Seeing lots and lots of data, the algorithm actually learns, like, okay, I saw previously in this case when glycemia is rising, but we already sent 2 units of insulin 10 minutes ago, then glycemia will drop and hit this level in 30 minutes, for example. And we need to be sure that the algorithm really understands the situation, because the decision then is so important. And that is, in my opinion, what makes the work of a data scientist very special, working in healthcare and particularly on diabetes. Concerning the acting in consequence part, I leave that for a future episode with me or one of my colleagues.
So thank you, Alexandre, where you are. Sylvie, you're also a data scientist at Diabeloop. Well, actually, Alexandre, I think, has a very interesting path, that led him to work in diabetes and at Diabeloop. Can you explain us a little bit how you came to work for diabetes?
Sure. How long do you have?
We have a bit of time. Go ahead.
I think that that always wanted to work in the health field. Maybe because my mom wanted to work with the health field when she was younger. But I think that why diabetes? It was actually an opportunity. At first, before Diabeloop, I worked in a consulting company, and it was great because you can work in different fields. It was great, but I then knew that after 2 years of working in different companies, I was like, something missing. Like I need more. Like I wanted to work in something with a meaning, and I remembered like health industry was something like where I really wanted to work in, and so then when I had this opportunity, I remembered that when I was like 6 or 7, I had a friend in the elementary school who had a type 1 diabetes, and I was really impressed of how to manage her disease. Like I remember that she had to prick her finger, that's how you say, several times a day, and she had to eat snacks in recess, and it was like amazing for me. Like she was only 7, and she has to do all of that, and she was like managing like a boss. So it was really impressive, and it reminds me that I should reconnect with her. So yes, and then when I had this opportunity, I was like working for type 1 diabetes patient and helping them would be a really great opportunity for me. That if we can help you, then it make me and everyone feeling better.
Glad we could help. Well, everybody here knows that Diabeloop is working on automated insulin delivery solutions mainly, and you're a data scientist. What are the major improvements in the algorithm in the treatment that you're working on, or that you have worked on, that can help people with diabetes live their passion?
Interesting question. I don't know if it's major improvements, but let me think about it a bit.
We can judge if it helps us living our passions. You can just tell us what you're working on.
I don't know if I can tell about what I'm working on, but what I can tell that sometimes we have to analyze the data from clinical trials and so on. Data from the CGM and also data from the feedbacks that we can have from the patients. And this is really important for us to understand what is important for you too. And what it was like, it helps us build our algorithm, because we need data, of course, but it's not enough. Like you said, understand the condition and understand what is needed, what is wanted for the patient is really one of our biggest need.
I think it kind of answers, but maybe partly, the question of Stephanie. She was asking, because she always wondered if it's a big challenge to work in the field of diabetes without having diabetes yourself, and how often do you eat a wall mentally, or is it not a problem at all?
Thank you for the question. Actually, sometimes I have to ask people with type 1 diabetes, because this is the type of diabetes I'm working on. like sometimes I don't understand or I don't know how they feel, they can feel. For example, when they have a low, well, maybe when they have a low, I can understand, or maybe when they have a high, that's how you say. I don't really understand, and I don't really know what they feel, and sometimes I just want to know, but just to understand what we can do to help, how we can adjust the, for example, the parameters, or how we could prevent um, having a high. All these questions about how the physiology works is important, and it's true that sometimes when you don't know the condition, it's tricky. But we have the data, we have a lot of feedbacks, and we can ask people about that. So it's really helpful. And we have a physiologist who knows a lot on this subject. So it really helps us.
Oh, thank you. I have a little comment on that because at Diabeloop, there are, I don't know exactly, but about 15-20% maybe of people with diabetes working at Diabeloop, and maybe people who have a loved one with diabetes, it's even more. And I have to say, like in a communication team, I'm the only one with diabetes. So I talk a lot about my life, but they ask me a lot of questions. And one thing for sure, and that's why also it was important for us with the talks that there would be people with diabetes, but also people working on on treatments and on improving and giving access to innovation, because I can assure you that those two, they are as passionate as I am. And so I just wanted to thank them for that and for their curiosity as well every day about the condition and the life. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you, Sylvie, so much for being here. Next time you will be the one on camera. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. That means a lot. Really. So we do have one more talk about sleeves, but we wanted to make the suspense last a little longer. But all the talks you've been seeing so far, as well as that additional mystery one, will be available on our YouTube channel right after this. So if you cannot wait, head over there. But yeah, you will be able to discover the story of Marine, who's a vegan and nomad cook, and her journey on becoming more mindful of her food choices. Of course, we will give you the link to that right after. And so all those stories we've been hearing today are, of course, really inspiring, but they only make up a tiny part of what living with diabetes is, right? And as you know, at Diabeloop, we are always very interested in hearing more voices and amplifying more voices, diverse voices. And that's why we are launching a new engagement program. So if you have a story about your life with diabetes to tell us, no matter the type of diabetes, please contact us, and you can be maybe the next guest editor on our blog, our Rocco Diabetes blog, or maybe the next invitee on our Diabeloop Stories podcast or next Diabeloop Talk. And if you don't know all of these platforms yet, we will also give you all the links. And of course, stay tuned for more about this engagement program. We will give you more info very soon. And I will now hand over to Marie.
Thanks, Marjolaine. We will be in person in Stockholm at EISD. So if you will be there, come say hi to our booth, which will be the MO6. And I'm sure you are going to recognize us thanks to our colorful booth. And if you want to schedule by now a short one-on-one interview with Stephanie, especially, who will be there, please contact us via social media or via email. And if you will not be at EISD, of course, we can talk together virtually by conference. Don't miss also our Meet the Expert session, which will be focused on DP Health for Pen, the solution Diabeloop is developing for multiple daily injection pen users. It's a session open to everyone, which will take place in the networking hub on Wednesday, 21st of September in the morning from 10 a.m.
I think we had a question from Rick. So we're going to take last questions because we have one. So Rick, thank you for reaching out. I wonder if you can address how the agreement with SFC is going and when the algorithm might be available in the US. I'm sorry, but I will not be able today to give you some more news on the agreement with SFC. That we don't have anything to disclose at the moment. But what I can tell you, Rick, is that coming to the US, it's still a very strong ambition of us. Of course, as you know, regulations it takes a lot of time. It's different than in Europe. But we are really working hard on the FDA agreement approval. We did not submit yet, but that's our goal for very soon. So be assured we're really working hard on that. And as soon as we can give you more news on that, we will disclose more news, of course. Well, I guess if, guys, you don't have questions, I hope you enjoyed this event today. I sure did. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, to show you what we are working on and what's important, and to bring out your voices and be part of the community as well. So a big thanks to Sylvie and Mathilde. Alysse and Jack and Alexandre also, because he helped us today, and of course to Marie and Marjolaine. And if you have any questions or if you want to meet EASD, I hope I will meet as much as you as possible if you're willing to have a chat. You have, I think, all our contacts. They've been going through the chat and everything, and otherwise you can find us very easily on social media. And you can also just go to YouTube in the next few days to check out the video of Marine. And thank you again to be with us today, and see you very soon. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.